Captain Marcus Thornfield had served the crown for 15 years, and in all that time he had never questioned a single order. His weathered hands gripped the ceremonial sword at his side as he stood at attention outside the throne room, the golden morning light streaming through stained glass windows casting colorful shadows across the marble floor. The palace buzzed with unusual tension that day, servants whispering in corners and nobles hurrying past with worried expressions. Marcus was known throughout the kingdom as the most loyal guard in the royal army. His dedication was legendary among his peers, who often joked that he would follow orders even if commanded to march into the sea. Standing 6 feet tall with steel-gray eyes and a beard that had begun showing silver streaks, he commanded respect from both his subordinates and superiors. The scar running from his left temple to his jaw told stories of battles fought in the king's name, each mark a testament to his unwavering service. The kingdom of Eldoria had been Marcus's life since he was barely 18 years old. He had risen through the ranks not through political connections or family influence, but through pure merit and an unshakable moral compass. Every morning he would polish his armor until it gleamed, ensuring that he represented the crown with dignity and honor. His fellow guards looked up to him, seeking his guidance in matters both professional and personal. On this particular morning, however, something felt different in the palace corridors. The usual cheerful chatter of servants had been replaced by hushed conversations that stopped whenever Marcus approached. Even the kitchen staff, who normally greeted him with warm smiles and offers of fresh bread, seemed subdued and anxious. The head cook, Mrs. Millicent, had simply nodded when she saw him, her usual friendly demeanor replaced by a troubled expression. As Marcus made his rounds through the palace, checking security points and ensuring his guards were at their posts, he noticed other subtle changes. The royal advisor, Lord Blackwood, had been seen entering and leaving the king's private chambers multiple times since dawn. The man's face bore a grim expression that Marcus had rarely witnessed, even during the kingdom's most challenging diplomatic crises. The morning progressed with an eerie calm that reminded Marcus of the stillness before a thunderstorm. He had learned to trust his instincts over the years, and every fiber of his being told him that something significant was about to unfold. The palace staff moved about their duties with mechanical precision, but their eyes betrayed an underlying fear that seemed to permeate the very walls of the ancient castle. Marcus remembered the day he had first set foot in this palace as a young recruit. King Edmund had personally welcomed the new guards, speaking about duty, honor, and the sacred trust placed in those who protect the royal family. Those words had shaped Marcus's entire worldview, creating an unbreakable bond between him and the crown that had guided every decision he had made since. The royal family had always treated Marcus with respect and kindness. King Edmund valued his counsel, Queen Isabella trusted him with her safety, and even the princes acknowledged his expertise in matters of security. But it was the youngest princess, Arya, who had always held a special place in his heart. Not in any improper way, but as a father figure might care for a daughter. He had watched her grow from a curious child into a thoughtful young woman, always impressed by her intelligence and compassion. Princess Arya was different from her siblings. While her older brothers focused on politics and military strategy, she spent her time in the palace library, learning about the kingdom's history and the lives of common people. She often asked Marcus about his experiences, genuinely interested in understanding the perspectives of those who served the crown. Her empathy and wisdom seemed far beyond her 19 years. As the clock tower chimed 10 times, Marcus received word that his presence was required in the council chamber. The message came from Lord Blackwood himself, delivered by a nervous page who refused to meet Marcus's eyes. This was unusual, as routine meetings were typically scheduled well in advance, and emergency sessions were rare during peacetime. Walking through the corridors toward the council chamber, Marcus passed several portraits of previous kings and queens, their painted eyes seeming to watch his every step. He wondered what challenges those rulers had faced and how their loyal guards had responded during times of crisis. The weight of history seemed to press down upon his shoulders as he approached the heavy oak doors of the chamber. The palace guards he encountered along the way offered respectful nods, but Marcus could see questions in their eyes. They too sensed that something important was happening, though none dared to voice their concerns. The discipline and training that Marcus had instilled in his men was evident in their continued professionalism, even in the face of uncertainty. As he reached the council chamber doors, Marcus paused for a moment to compose himself. Whatever lay beyond those doors, he would face it with the same integrity and loyalty that had defined his service to the crown. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family and uphold the laws of the kingdom, and he intended to honor that commitment regardless of the circumstances that awaited him inside. The heavy oak doors creaked open as Marcus entered the council chamber, revealing a scene that immediately set his nerves on edge. King Edmund sat at the head of the long table, his usually composed demeanor replaced by visible agitation. Dark circles under his eyes suggested a sleepless night, and his normally immaculate appearance showed signs of distress. Lord Blackwood stood beside the king's chair, while several other advisors sat around the table with documents spread before them. Marcus approached the table and bowed respectfully, waiting for permission to speak. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the distant sound of birds chirping in the palace gardens. He had attended countless meetings in this chamber over the years, but never had the atmosphere felt so heavy with unspoken tension. King Edmund looked up at Marcus with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. The monarch who had always projected strength and confidence now appeared vulnerable and uncertain. When he finally spoke, his voice lacked its usual commanding tone, replaced instead by something that sounded almost like defeat. "Captain Thornfield," the king began, his voice barely above a whisper, "what I am about to tell you must never leave this room. The kingdom faces a threat unlike any we have encountered before." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "Foreign armies have surrounded our borders. Our allies have abandoned us, and our treasury has been depleted by years of poor harvests and trade disputes." Marcus felt his stomach drop as the implications of the king's words began to sink in. He had known that the kingdom faced challenges, but the severity of the situation was far worse than he had imagined. Still, he maintained his composure, waiting for the king to continue. Lord Blackwood stepped forward, his gaunt face even more serious than usual. "The enemy has made their demands clear," he said, his voice carrying a bitter edge. "They want complete surrender, but they have also made a specific request that complicates matters significantly." He glanced at the king before continuing. "They have demanded that Princess Arya be handed over to them as part of the terms of surrender." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He felt his jaw clench involuntarily as rage began to build in his chest. The idea of anyone making such a demand about Princess Arya was unthinkable, and the fact that it was even being discussed in the council chamber was almost beyond his comprehension. King Edmund seemed to read the emotion in Marcus's expression. "I know how this sounds, Captain. I know what you must be thinking. But the situation is desperate. If we refuse their demands, they will lay siege to the kingdom. Thousands of innocent people will die. Our people will starve, and in the end we will likely lose everything anyway." Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "Your Majesty, surely there must be other options. We could fortify the castle, send for help from neighboring kingdoms, or attempt to negotiate different terms." The king shook his head sadly. "We have already explored every possibility. Our defenses would not hold against their numbers. Our former allies have made it clear they will not intervene, and the enemy has stated that their terms are non-negotiable." He stood up from his chair, walking to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. The princess would be treated well according to their assurances. She would be married to their prince and live in comfort. Marcus felt something inside him rebel against what he was hearing. Everything he had been taught about honor, duty, and protection seemed to war against the pragmatic reality being presented to him. The thought of Princess Arya being used as a bargaining chip, regardless of how well she might be treated, went against every instinct he possessed. "Captain," Lord Blackwood continued, "we need your help to convince the princess to accept this arrangement willingly. She trusts you more than anyone else in the palace. Your words carry weight with her that ours do not." The advisor's eyes were cold and calculating as he spoke. "If she refuses, we may have no choice but to use force, and none of us want that outcome." The room fell silent again as Marcus processed the full scope of what was being asked of him. They wanted him to betray the trust that Princess Arya had placed in him, to convince her to sacrifice herself for the sake of the kingdom. The logical part of his mind understood the reasoning behind their request, but his heart rebelled against the very idea. Marcus had always prided himself on following orders without question, But this was different. This challenged the very core of his beliefs about right and wrong. He thought about the young girl who had grown up in these halls, who had always shown kindness to everyone around her, who had never asked for anything but had given so much of herself to others. The king turned back from the window, his expression pleading. "I need your answer, Captain. Will you help us save the kingdom?" The weight of the question hung in the air between them, and Marcus could feel the eyes of everyone in the room focused on him, waiting for his response. For the first time in his military career, Captain Marcus Thornfield found himself truly uncertain about what his duty required of him. The oath he had sworn to protect the royal family seemed to conflict directly with the order he was being given, and he realized that whatever decision he made would change everything. Marcus stood in the council chamber, feeling the weight of 15 years of unwavering loyalty pressing against his conscience. The faces around the table watched him expectantly, waiting for the response they assumed would come automatically from their most obedient guard. But for the first time in his career, the words of agreement would not form on his lips. "Your Majesty," Marcus said slowly, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. "I cannot in good conscience carry out this order." The silence that followed his declaration was deafening. Several advisors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, while Lord Blackwood's face darkened with anger. King Edmund's expression showed a mixture of surprise and disappointment. "Captain Thornfield, I need you to reconsider. This is not a request, it is a direct command from your king. The survival of our entire kingdom depends on your cooperation." Marcus felt his chest tighten, but his resolve only strengthened. "I swore an oath to protect the royal family, Your Majesty. That oath did not include delivering them to their enemies, regardless of the circumstances." He straightened his shoulders, meeting the king's gaze directly. Princess Arya deserves better than to be treated as a commodity in a political transaction. Lord Blackwood slammed his hand on the table, his composure finally cracking. "You forget yourself, Captain. Your personal feelings about the princess are irrelevant. You are a soldier and soldiers follow orders. This is treason." The accusation hung in the air like a sword ready to fall. Marcus had never been called a traitor before, and the word stung more than he expected. But even as his career and possibly his life hung in the balance, he could not bring himself to regret his decision. "If protecting Princess Arya from being sacrificed makes me a traitor," Marcus replied calmly, "then I accept that label. But I will not be the instrument of her destruction, no matter what threats are made against me." King Edmund rubbed his temples, the stress of the situation clearly taking its toll. "Captain, you are forcing my hand. If you will not help us convince the princess voluntarily, then we will have to proceed without your cooperation. Guards will be sent to escort her to the enemy forces, with or without her consent." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The thought of palace guards, men he had trained and commanded, being used to forcibly remove Princess Arya from her home was unbearable. These were good men who respected both Marcus and the princess, but they would follow orders if commanded by the king. "I understand your position, Your Majesty," Marcus said, his mind already racing through possible alternatives. "But I must ask you to reconsider. Surely there must be another way to resolve this crisis without sacrificing Princess Arya's freedom and future." The king's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Captain, I have spent sleepless nights exploring every possible option." "Do you think this decision was made lightly? Do you believe I want to hand over my own daughter to strangers?" His voice rose with emotion. "But sometimes a ruler must make impossible choices to save his people." Marcus understood the king's anguish, but he also knew that some prices were too high to pay, even for peace. "Your Majesty, Princess Arya is not just your daughter. She is a symbol of hope for the people. If word spreads that the royal family has sacrificed one of their own to save themselves, it will destroy the morale of everyone in the kingdom." Several advisors began murmuring among themselves, some nodding in agreement with Marcus's words. Lord Blackwood, however, remained unmoved by the captain's argument. "Enough," the king declared, silencing the room. "Captain Thornfield, you have made your position clear and I have made mine. You are hereby relieved of your duties as captain of the royal guard. You will surrender your sword and leave the palace immediately." The finality of the king's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had devoted his entire adult life to serving the crown, and now that service was ending in disgrace. But even as his heart broke, he knew he could not have chosen differently. Marcus slowly unbuckled his sword belt and placed his ceremonial weapon on the table. The sound of metal hitting wood seemed to echo through the chamber, marking the end of an era. He removed his captain's insignia and set them beside the sword, each action feeling like he was stripping away pieces of his identity. "I am sorry it has come to this, Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly. "I hope you will find a way to save the kingdom without sacrificing Princess Arya's happiness." He bowed one final time, then turned toward the door. As he reached for the door handle, King Edmund called out behind him, "Captain Marcus, if you interfere with our plans in any way, you will be arrested for treason. I hope you understand the gravity of that warning." Marcus paused at the door, his hand on the handle. Without turning around, he replied, "I understand perfectly, Your Majesty, but I also understand that some things are more important than following orders." With that, he opened the door and walked out of the council chamber, leaving behind the only life he had ever known. Walking through the palace corridors as a civilian felt surreal. Guards who had served under him looked confused and concerned as they saw him without his insignia. He knew word would spread quickly through the palace that Captain Thornfield had been dismissed, and speculation about the reasons would run rampant. As Marcus approached the main entrance of the palace, his mind was already working on what he needed to do next. He might no longer be captain of the royal guard, but his commitment to protecting Princess Arya remained unchanged. If the king was determined to hand her over to the enemy, then Marcus would have to find another way to help her, even if it meant working outside the law. Marcus walked through the palace gates feeling like a stranger in his own home. The guards at the entrance watched him with confusion and concern, unsure why their former captain was leaving without his uniform or weapons. He could see questions in their eyes, but protocol prevented them from asking directly. Word would spread quickly through the ranks about his dismissal, and he knew many of his men would be troubled by the news. Finding himself outside the palace walls for the first time in years, without official business, Marcus felt disoriented and purposeless. The bustling streets of the capital city seemed foreign to him, filled with merchants, craftsmen, and citizens going about their daily lives, unaware of the crisis unfolding within the palace walls. Children played in the streets while their parents conducted business, all of them blissfully ignorant of the fact that their kingdom teetered on the brink of surrender. Marcus made his way to a small tavern near the palace district where off-duty guards often gathered. The Golden Crown had been a second home to him over the years, a place where he could relax with his men and share stories of their service. The proprietor, a retired guard named Thomas, had always treated Marcus with respect and friendship. When Marcus entered the tavern, Thomas immediately noticed something was wrong. The absence of Marcus's uniform and the troubled expression on his face told a story without words. Thomas approached cautiously, his weathered face showing concern. "Marcus, my friend, what brings you here at this hour? And where is your uniform?" Thomas asked quietly, leading him to a secluded table in the back of the tavern. Marcus sank into a chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 43 years. "I have been relieved of my duties, Thomas. I can say no more than that. But I fear dark times are ahead for our kingdom." Thomas poured 2 mugs of ale and sat across from Marcus, his expression grave. "In all the years I have known you, I have never seen you look so troubled. Whatever happened in that palace must have been serious indeed." Over the next hour, Marcus shared what he could of the situation, without revealing specific details. He spoke of impossible choices, of orders that conflicted with honor, and of his refusal to compromise his principles even at great personal cost. Thomas listened without judgment, understanding that some secrets were too dangerous to share completely. As they talked, several off-duty guards entered the tavern. Marcus could see the shock on their faces when they recognized him sitting there in civilian clothes. Word was already spreading through the ranks, and confusion reigned among the men who had served under his command for years. Sergeant William Hayes, one of Marcus's most trusted subordinates, approached their table hesitantly. Marcus, sir, is it true? Have you really been dismissed from service?" Marcus looked up at the young man who had served with distinction under his command. "It is true, William, and I suspect you will soon receive orders that will test your own conscience. When that time comes, remember that your first duty is to protect the innocent, not to blindly follow commands." William's face paled as he tried to understand the implications of Marcus's cryptic warning. "Sir, what should we do?" "The men are confused and worried. Without your leadership, morale is already suffering. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility for his men, even though he was no longer their official commander. Continue to serve with honor, William. Protect the royal family to the best of your ability, but remember that protection sometimes means making difficult choices about what is truly in their best interests. As the evening progressed, more guards filtered into the tavern, seeking answers that Marcus could not provide. He could see the uncertainty in their faces, the questions they wanted to ask but dared not voice. These were good men who had always looked to him for guidance, and now they were adrift without clear direction. Marcus realized that his dismissal would create a vacuum of leadership at the worst possible time. The guards trusted him more than they trusted the advisors who now controlled palace security. Without his stabilizing influence, the men might be more susceptible to orders that went against their better judgment. Thomas noticed Marcus's growing agitation and suggested they move to a private room upstairs. Away from the curious ears of the other patrons, Marcus was able to think more clearly about his next moves. He knew that Princess Arya would soon be informed of the king's decision, if she had not been already. Someone needed to warn her about what was coming, and that someone would have to be him. The challenge was gaining access to the princess without being detected by the new security arrangements that would undoubtedly be put in place. Marcus knew every secret passage and hidden entrance in the palace, knowledge gained through years of studying the building's defenses. But using that knowledge to circumvent royal security would make him a criminal in the eyes of the law. As night fell over the capital, Marcus made his decision. He could not stand by and watch Princess Arya be handed over to strangers without at least giving her the chance to understand what was happening and make her own informed choice. If that made him a traitor in the eyes of the king, then so be it. Thomas provided Marcus with a dark cloak and simple clothes that would help him blend in with the shadows. "Be careful, my friend," the old tavern keeper warned. "Whatever you are planning, the risks are enormous. If you are caught, even I may not be able to help you." Marcus pulled the hood of the cloak over his head, transforming from a recognizable former captain into just another citizen moving through the darkened streets. "I know the risks, Thomas, but some things are worth risking everything for. Princess Arya is one of those things." As Marcus stepped back into the night, he could feel the weight of destiny pressing down upon him. Everything he had worked for, everything he believed in, had led to this moment. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but his conscience would not allow him to choose any other course. Moving through the familiar streets toward the palace, Marcus began to formulate a plan. He knew where Princess Arya's chambers were located. He knew the guard rotations, and he knew the secret ways through the palace that few others were aware of. Tonight he would risk everything to ensure that the princess understood the choice that was being forced upon her. The palace at midnight was a different world from the bustling hub of activity Marcus had known during his years of service. Shadows danced across empty corridors, and the silence was broken only by the distant footsteps of night guards making their rounds. Marcus moved through the darkness like a ghost, using every skill he had learned during decades of military service to avoid detection. He approached the palace through the old servants' entrance near the kitchen gardens, a route he had discovered years earlier while investigating security vulnerabilities. The door was secured with a simple lock that he was able to pick using tools borrowed from Thomas's tavern. His hands trembled slightly as he worked, not from fear of discovery but from the magnitude of what he was attempting. Once inside, Marcus navigated the maze of servant corridors that ran like veins through the palace walls. These passages were designed to allow staff to move efficiently without disturbing the royal family. But they also provided perfect cover for someone who knew their layout intimately. The familiar smell of beeswax and stone brought back memories of his early days in service, when he had memorized every inch of the palace as part of his training. As he climbed the narrow staircase toward the royal quarters, Marcus could hear the muffled voices of guards conducting their regular patrols. He recognized some of the voices as men who had served under his command, and the sound filled him with both pride and sadness. These were good soldiers doing their duty, unaware that their loyalty was about to be tested in ways they could never imagine. Princess Arya's chambers were located in the east wing of the palace, overlooking the rose gardens that she had always loved. Marcus had stood guard outside these rooms countless times over the years, protecting her while she slept and ensuring her safety during the vulnerable hours of night. Now he was approaching those same rooms as an intruder, a criminal in the eyes of the law. The hallway leading to the princess's quarters was patrolled by 2 guards, both of whom Marcus recognized. They were young men, competent but not particularly observant during the quiet midnight hours. Marcus waited patiently in an alcove, timing their movements and noting the pattern of their patrol. When they disappeared around the corner at the far end of the hall, he had approximately 10 minutes before they would return. Moving swiftly but silently, Marcus approached the door to Princess Aria's sitting room. He knew that she often stayed up late reading, preferring the quiet hours of night for her studies. A thin line of light beneath the door confirmed that she was indeed awake, probably absorbed in one of the history books that fascinated her so much. Marcus tapped gently on the door, a soft rhythm that he had used years earlier to announce his presence when bringing her news or messages. He heard movement inside the room, followed by cautious footsteps approaching the door. "Who is there?" came the princess's voice, soft but alert. She had always been intelligent and careful, traits that had served her well in navigating the complex politics of court life. "Princess, it is Marcus," he whispered through the door. "I must speak with you urgently. Please, it concerns your safety." There was a moment of silence before the door opened quietly. Princess Aria stood before him, dressed in a simple blue nightgown with her long auburn hair falling loosely around her shoulders. Her green eyes, so much like her mother's, showed surprise at seeing her former protector standing there in common clothes. "Marcus, what are you doing here? And why are you dressed like that?" she asked, stepping aside to allow him into the sitting room. The space was warm and comfortable, filled with books and personal treasures that reflected her gentle nature. Marcus entered quickly, closing the door behind him. "Princess, there is no time for a full explanation, but you are in terrible danger. The king has made an agreement that will require you to be handed over to enemy forces as part of a surrender treaty." Princess Aria's face went pale as she processed his words. She moved to a chair by the fireplace, sitting down heavily as the implications began to sink in. "My father would never agree to such a thing. You must be mistaken." Marcus knelt beside her chair, his voice urgent but gentle. "I wish I were wrong, Princess. But I was in the council chamber when the decision was made. The kingdom is surrounded. Our allies have abandoned us, and the enemy has demanded your surrender as part of their terms. The king believes he has no choice." Tears began to form in Princess Aria's eyes, but she maintained her composure with the strength that had always impressed Marcus. "How long do I have?" she asked quietly. "Not long. Tomorrow, perhaps the day after. Guards will come to escort you to the enemy forces. They hope you will go willingly, but if not—" Marcus let the implication hang in the air. Princess Aria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where she had played as a child. "And what of you, Marcus? Why are you here telling me this instead of preparing for my escort?" Marcus felt a mixture of pride and sadness at her perceptive question. "I refuse to carry out the order, Princess. I have been relieved of my duties and banished from the palace. I came here because I believe you deserve to know the truth about what is happening and to make your own choice about how to respond." The princess turned back to face him, and Marcus could see the intelligence and determination that had always set her apart from others in the royal family. "What choice do I have, Marcus? If I refuse to go, innocent people will die. If I agree to go, I lose my freedom and possibly my life. Neither option seems acceptable." Marcus stood up, moving closer to her. "There might be another way, Princess, but it would require courage and sacrifice from both of us. We could try to escape the kingdom, find allies who might help us reclaim what has been lost, or discover some other solution that does not require your sacrifice." Princess Aria considered his words carefully, weighing the risks and possibilities. "You would be willing to do that for me? To become a fugitive and give up everything you have worked for?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Princess, I swore an oath to protect the royal family. That oath did not end when I was dismissed from service. If helping you escape is the only way to honor that commitment, then I am prepared to accept whatever consequences follow." The sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway reminded them both that time was running short. Princess Aria made her decision with the quick thinking that had always characterized her approach to problems. Princess Aria moved with surprising decisiveness as the footsteps grew closer in the hallway outside. She quickly gathered a few essential items from her room while Marcus kept watch at the door, his heart pounding as he listened for any sign that their conversation had been detected by the patrolling guards. I will not be used as a bargaining chip, she whispered firmly, wrapping a dark cloak around her shoulders. If my father believes that sacrificing me will save the kingdom, then perhaps it is time for me to take control of my own destiny. Her voice carried a strength that reminded Marcus why he had always believed she would make an exceptional leader. Marcus nodded approvingly as he watched her prepare. Princess Arya had always been intelligent and resourceful, but tonight he was seeing a new side of her character, one that showed the steel beneath her gentle exterior. She gathered a small bag with coins, jewelry that could be traded, and a few personal items that held sentimental value. The sound of the guards' footsteps had passed, giving them a brief window of opportunity. Marcus opened the door carefully, checking to ensure the hallway was clear before motioning for the princess to follow. They moved silently through the corridors, using the servant passages that Marcus knew would be unguarded at this hour. As they descended toward the lower levels of the palace, Princess Arya suddenly stopped. Marcus, wait. There is something I must do before we leave. She turned toward a different corridor, one that led toward the royal treasury and the king's private study. Marcus felt a surge of concern. Princess, we do not have time for delays. Every moment we remain in the palace increases the risk of discovery. Trust me, she replied, her voice carrying an authority that surprised him. What I need to retrieve may be crucial to saving the kingdom without my sacrifice, but I need your help to access my father's private chambers. Against his better judgment, Marcus followed Princess Arya through the maze of corridors toward the king's study. The area was more heavily guarded than other parts of the palace, but Marcus knew the patrol schedules and was able to guide them safely through the shadows. The king's study was secured with multiple locks, but Princess Arya produced a key from beneath her cloak. I have had access to this room since I was 16, she explained quietly. My father wanted me to understand the challenges of ruling, so he allowed me to read diplomatic correspondence and financial records. Inside the study, Princess Arya moved directly to a specific cabinet, opening it with another key and removing several documents. Marcus watched nervously as she examined papers by candlelight, her face growing more determined with each page she read. Marcus, look at this, she said urgently, showing him a letter bearing the seal of a neighboring kingdom. This correspondence shows that King Frederick of Westmarch has been offering military assistance for months. My father's advisors told him that no help was available, but these letters prove otherwise. Marcus examined the documents, his military experience allowing him to quickly assess their significance. The letters detailed specific offers of troops, supplies, and financial support, resources that could have made the difference in defending the kingdom. Why would the advisors hide this information from the king? Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Princess Arya's expression hardened as she continued reading through the papers. Because Lord Blackwood and his allies have been secretly negotiating their own deals with the enemy. These documents show payments made to several advisors in exchange for ensuring that the kingdom would surrender without significant resistance. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The trusted advisors who had been guiding the king's decisions were actually working for the enemy, manipulating the situation to ensure that surrender seemed like the only viable option. The princess's sacrifice was not necessary to save the kingdom. It was simply another tool in their betrayal. We must return to your father immediately, Marcus said, reaching for the documents. This evidence will change everything. Princess. Arya shook her head, her strategic mind already working through the implications. No, Marcus, if we confront them directly, they will simply claim the documents are forgeries. We need to approach this more carefully. She selected several key pieces of evidence and returned the rest to their original positions. We must get word to King Frederick and arrange for his assistants to arrive before the surrender deadline. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with anxiety. The path forward was becoming clearer, but it would require them to work outside the established chain of command, while avoiding detection by the very people they were trying to expose. How do you propose we contact Westmarch without alerting the traitors? Marcus asked, his tactical mind already considering the challenges involved. Princess Arya smiled for the first time since their conversation began. I have been corresponding secretly with scholars in King Frederick's court for years, sharing research about historical trade agreements between our kingdoms. They know me and trust my word. If I can get a message to them explaining the true situation, King Frederick will send help immediately. Marcus marveled at the princess's foresight and preparation. Even in her scholarly pursuits, she had been building relationships that could serve the kingdom in its hour of need. How can we get a message through enemy lines without it being intercepted? There is a merchant named Henrik, who trades between our kingdoms regularly. He has been carrying my letters to the scholars for over 2 years, believing them to be academic correspondence. He will not question another letter, and he knows routes through the mountains that bypass the main roads where enemy forces are positioned. As they prepared to leave the king's study, Princess Arya took one more item from a hidden compartment, a royal seal that would authenticate any message she sent. Marcus realized that she had been planning for various contingencies far longer than anyone had imagined. Her reputation as a bookish, gentle princess had concealed a sharp political mind and careful strategic thinking. They retraced their path through the servant corridors, moving even more cautiously now that they carried evidence that could expose the conspiracy. The weight of their discovery made every shadow seem threatening, every sound potentially dangerous. Marcus found himself constantly checking behind them, half expecting to find Lord Blackwood's agents in pursuit. As they reached the lower levels of the palace, Princess Arya led them toward the kitchen complex where Henrik would be making his early morning deliveries. The merchant was known for his punctuality and reliability, qualities that had made him valuable to the princess's secret correspondence network. Once we send the message, what then? Marcus asked as they waited in the shadows near the kitchen entrance. King Frederick's forces will need time to reach us, and the enemy will not wait indefinitely for their answer. Princess Arya considered the question carefully. We must buy time by making it appear that I am considering their offer willingly. If the king believes I am cooperating, the advisors will not feel pressured to accelerate their timeline. She paused, her expression growing more serious. But Marcus, once we set this plan in motion, there will be no turning back. If we are discovered, both of us will be charged with treason. Marcus looked at the young woman who had grown from a curious child into a leader capable of saving her kingdom. Princess, I have spent my entire adult life following orders without question. Tonight, for the first time, I am following my conscience instead. Whatever happens, I will not regret this choice. The sound of cartwheels on cobblestones announced Henrik's arrival. Princess Arya quickly finished writing her message, using coded language that would be understood by the scholars but appear innocent to casual observers. She sealed the letter with wax and pressed her seal into it, creating an authentication that King Frederick would recognize. Henrik, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands, accepted the letter without question, as he had done many times before. Same route as always, Princess? He asked quietly, not seeming surprised to see her in the kitchen at dawn. Yes, Henrik, but this time, speed is essential. Lives depend on this message reaching its destination as quickly as possible. Princess Arya pressed extra coins into his hand. Take the mountain pass and do not stop for anything. As Henrik's cart disappeared into the early morning mist, Marcus and Princess Arya stood together in the shadows, both understanding that they had just committed themselves to a course of action that would either save the kingdom or destroy them both. The die had been cast, and now they could only wait to see whether their gamble would succeed. 3 days passed in tense uncertainty as Princess Arya played the role of a dutiful daughter considering her father's request while secretly waiting for word from King Frederick. During this time, Marcus remained hidden in the city, staying with Thomas at the Golden Crown Tavern while gathering intelligence about the enemy forces and the palace situation. On the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. Princess Arya requested a private audience with her father, claiming she had reached a decision about the enemy's demands. King Edmund, looking haggard from sleepless nights and the weight of impossible choices, received his daughter in his private chambers with Lord Blackwood and several other advisors present. Father, Princess Arya began, her voice steady and clear. I have given great thought to the situation facing our kingdom, And I believe I understand the difficult position you are in." She paused, noting the relief that began to appear on the king's face. "However, before I give you my final answer, I think you should know about some information that has come to my attention." Lord Blackwood shifted uncomfortably, his political instincts warning him that something was amiss. "Princess, with respect, this is not the time for games or delays. The enemy grows impatient, and further hesitation could result in violence." Princess Arya turned to face the advisor directly, her green eyes blazing with controlled anger. "You are quite right, Lord Blackwood. This is indeed not the time for games, which is why I think my father should see these." She produced the documents she had taken from the king's study, spreading them across the table where everyone could see. The silence that followed was deafening. King Edmund leaned forward to examine the papers, his expression changing from confusion to shock to rage as he read the evidence of betrayal. The letters from King Frederick, the secret payments to advisors, the deliberate concealment of available military assistance, all of it was laid bare in black and white. "What is the meaning of this?" the king demanded, his voice rising with each word. "Lord Blackwood, explain these documents immediately." Lord Blackwood's face had gone pale, but he attempted to maintain his composure. "Your Majesty, I can assure you that these documents are forgeries, planted by enemies of the crown to sow discord at our most vulnerable moment." Princess Arya reached into her cloak and produced the royal seal she had used to authenticate her message to King Frederick. "These documents bear the official seals of Westmarch, Father. They are not forgeries, and Lord Blackwood knows it. He and his conspirators have been working with the enemy to ensure our kingdom's surrender, while enriching themselves in the process." The king rose from his chair, his face flushed with anger and betrayal. "Guards!" he shouted. "Arrest Lord Blackwood and any advisor whose name appears on these documents." As the palace guards moved to carry out the king's orders, Lord Blackwood made one final desperate attempt to salvage his position. "Your Majesty, you are making a terrible mistake. Without the arrangement I have negotiated, the kingdom will fall and thousands will die. The only mistake I made was trusting you," King Edmund replied coldly. "Take him away." With the traitors removed from the chamber, Princess Arya approached her father. "There is more, Father. I have already sent word to King Frederick through secure channels. His forces are likely already on their way to assist us. We may not need to surrender at all if we can hold out long enough for help to arrive." King Edmund looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. "You did all of this? How did you know about the secret correspondence? How did you manage to send messages without being detected?" Princess Arya smiled, the weight of secrecy finally lifting from her shoulders. "I have been preparing for various contingencies for years, Father. My correspondence with scholars in Westmarch was not purely academic. I was building relationships that could serve the kingdom if needed. And Marcus helped me access the documents and arrange for secure communication." At the mention of Marcus's name, the king's expression grew complicated. "Marcus, but I dismissed him from service. Where is he now?" "He is in the city, Father. He refused to follow the order to convince me to surrender because he believed it was wrong. Even after being dismissed, he risked everything to warn me about the conspiracy and help expose the truth." King Edmund was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. "Bring Marcus to me immediately," he finally said. "I owe him an apology and my gratitude." Within an hour, Marcus stood once again before the king, though this time the circumstances were vastly different. King Edmund looked at the man who had served faithfully for 15 years, whose refusal to follow orders had ultimately saved the kingdom from betrayal. "Captain Thornfield," the king began formally, "I owe you a profound apology. Your refusal to obey my orders was not treason. It was the act of a man whose honor remained intact when mine faltered. I am reinstating you immediately and promoting you to General of the Royal Guard." Marcus bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. "Your Majesty, I seek no reward for doing what my conscience demanded. I am simply grateful that Princess Arya was able to uncover the truth before it was too late." Princess Arya stepped forward, placing her hand on Marcus's arm. "Without your courage and guidance, none of this would have been possible. You taught me that sometimes protecting someone means refusing to follow orders, even when the cost seems unbearable." 2 days later, the horizon filled with the banners of King Frederick's army, arriving just as the enemy's patience reached its breaking point. The sight of reinforcements transformed the kingdom's position from hopeless to defensible, and the enemy forces, faced with a united opposition they had not expected, agreed to negotiate a peaceful resolution rather than face a costly siege. Lord Blackwood and his conspirators were tried for treason and sentenced accordingly, their treachery serving as a warning to any who might consider betraying the crown for personal gain. The kingdom emerged from its crisis stronger and more united, with a deeper appreciation for the importance of honor and integrity in leadership. Marcus continued to serve as general of the royal guard, but his relationship with the royal family had fundamentally changed. He was no longer just a loyal soldier following orders. He had become a trusted advisor whose judgment was valued precisely because he had proven willing to stand against authority when conscience demanded it. Princess Aria's role in saving the kingdom elevated her status among the people and established her as a leader in her own right. Her intelligence, courage, and strategic thinking had prevented a catastrophe and demonstrated that true strength sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources. Years later, when historians wrote about the crisis that nearly destroyed the kingdom, they would note that salvation came not from following orders blindly, but from a royal guard who stood firm against all commands until the youngest princess showed him another way, a way that honored both duty and conscience, proving that sometimes the greatest loyalty requires the courage to say no.